Constantin Valdor, also known as the First of the 10,000, was the chief custodian to the Emperor of Mankind as Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes at the time of the Unification Wars, the Great Crusade, and the Horus Heresy. Beyond his absolute loyalty to the Emperor, Constantin Valdor was known for his stoic and observant personality. Despite the claims by outside observers he did not experience emotions such as pride or arrogance, or really any feeling at all besides his sense of duty to the Emperor. The Thunder Warrior Ushoten expressed pity for Valdor, stating that he had all the humanity sucked from him and had become numb. Valdor did not disagree with the sentiment. Nonetheless, he seems capable of taking fondness to certain individuals, such as Uwoma Kandawire and Ushoten. Valdor's battle prowess was legendary. His reaction time was to the point where it seemed as if he could see time itself come to a halt. A warrior of superlative skill, it was said that Valdor could match even a Primarch in single combat. Indeed, such was his might, that there were those, even in the imperial court, who called him a Primarch in all but name. The origins of Constantin Valdor are mysterious. According to Amar Astarte, his original parents were killed by the Emperor, who moved entire armies across continents to locate and retrieve him. Valdor himself knows very little of his past before becoming the Emperor's servant. While commonly accepted as the first Custodes, Valdor does not recall if he was truly the first custodian, or simply the first successfully produced one. He served during the Unification Wars at the Battle of Morland Senator. A handful of years later, he assassinated Koja Zu, the minister of the Anuatan Steppes, and claimed her son, Ra Endymion, for the Legio Custodes. During the Battle of Morland Sen, Valdor witnessed the savagery of the Thunder Warriors and became worried over their future. By the end of the Unification Wars, Valdor had emerged as part of the ruling triumvirate of terror alongside the Emperor and Malcador. He had become suspicious of Grand Provost Marshal Uwoma Kandawire, dispatching summoners to unravel her conspiracy before it could begin. However, the conspirators still struck in the palace coup, during which Valdor was confronted by Kandawire, as well as Ushoten and his surviving Thunder Warriors. Valdor urged the conspirators to surrender, but when they refused he deployed the Proto-Legions Astartes in their first battle. During the battle the rebels were crushed and Valdor slew Ushoten, an act he took no gratification in as he had admired the general. Surprisingly, Valdor spared Kandawire and let her leave the palace to retire in peace. Later Valdor expressed his surprise when Malcador stated that the Primarchs were still alive and that the Emperor was attempting to find them. Valdor couldn't understand why the archenemy had decided to spare them and believed that if they were alive then they would be corrupted. Valdor instead wished to raise armies of mortals to be led by his custodians. Prior to the Horus Heresy, Valdor had earned 1,932 names. By the 41st millennium a book that apparently had his whole name written down took up an entire volume. Horus Heresy. Just prior to the open outbreak of the Horus Heresy, Valdor was charged by the Emperor to accompany Leman Russ of the Space Wolves in bringing Magnus the Red to account for breaking promises made during the Council of Nicaea, at which the Emperor had strictly forbidden the use of sorcery and psychic powers. Valdor, with a contingent of elite Custodian Guard, fought alongside Russ and the Space Wolves on Prospero. He and his forces were responsible for killing at least 3 of the greatest psykers of the Thousand Suns, and routing a force much more numerous than their own. However, little else is known after this. Valdor eventually faced over 30 of the elite Kenetai, Blade Masters, warriors who could predict an enemy's attacks through psychic precognition. The Captain General slew every one of these deadly warriors, receiving only a single wound in the process. According to one account, he was also responsible for saving Bjorn when his arm was corrupted by the sorcerous powers of a Thousand Sun Psyker. Valdor sliced Bjorn's arm off to prevent the corruption from overrunning his body. The other states that Bjorn's arm was cut off by a skjold of the Space Wolves, Caspar Horsa. When Amon Tauromachian returned from his extended blood game, Valdor informed his fellow Custodian of how Horus Lupercal had declared rebellion against the Emperor. When Tauromachian asked how this could happen, Valdor, speaking as someone who knew the War Master, rejected theories that it was pride or resentment, instead voicing his belief that something had driven Horus and his closest advisors mad. Valdor then assigned Tauromachian with the task of investigating Firam Sichar for evidence of treason. After Horus declared his rebellion, Valdor then oversaw the operation of and deployment of the first ever execution team. Invited by the Master of Assassins whose secret identity was Malcador the Sigillite, each clade selected a single Alphadan operative for the mission. The target was Horus Lupercal. Rogel Dorn learned of such events and challenged Valdor, claiming that Horus being alive was a boon because he was predictable, and killing the head of the rebellion would not stop it, someone less predictable would simply take over. Valdor argued that the actions of the Officio Assassinorum were not necessarily cowardly, but expedient. Valdor says to Dorn that they all want the same thing, to preserve the Emperor. Dorn however claims that Valdor's role is to safeguard the life of the Emperor, whilst Dorn himself, and all the Astartes' role is to safeguard the Imperium. The Assassin's mission uncovered valuable information and encountered Erebus' own agent, demonically enhanced. The mission to kill Horus is a failure as Horus is tipped off of the attempt on his life and sends a proxy who is killed in his place. Dorn and Valdor continue to argue, Dorn citing that to preserve the Imperium we must have a moral code, Valdor citing that to match Horus' evil we must not stop at underhanded tactics. The Emperor settles the argument with his final statement, no more shadows. No more veils. Later, as the majority of the Custodian Guard was occupied by the war within the Webway, Valdor assumed a vital position on the Loyalist War Council alongside Malcador, Rogel Dorn, and Cain. He reappeared shortly before Leman Russ left Terra to confront Horus directly, returning the Spear of Russ to him. During their conversation, Valdor expressed disdain at the Space Wolves' use of rune priests, considering them no different from normal librarians who were now banned due to the Council of Nicaea. Valdor next appeared as the Solar War began, meeting with Rogel Dorn alongside Sanguinius, Jagatai Khan, Malcador, and Dorn's command staff. Siege of Terra. Valdor fought in defense of mankind's homeworld during the Siege of Terra. During the battle, Loyalist Marines who witnessed the Captain General in combat saw him reave through traitor Marines as easily as they would against ordinary humans and weaker Xenos. He also deployed Amorn Tauromachian to investigate apparent demonic activity in the Imperial Palace. When Amorn asked what should be done to Euphrati Keela and her proto-imperial cultists, Valdor ordered that they remain unharmed as part of Malcador's plan to use them in the fight against Chaos. After the fall of the Lion's Gate spaceport, he helped lead the defense of the Colossi Gate alongside Jagatai Khan and Raldron, fighting against swathes of demons. After the escape of Basilio from Blackstone prison, Valdor saw the mad scientist a threat big enough to warrant his own personal attention, and he hunted the prisoner throughout the palace. He eventually saved from a roaming Night Lord and decided that the human's supposed anti-Astartes bioweapon could be of service to the Emperor. Valdor was summoned to the Emperor's side during the final teleportation attack aboard the Vengeful Spirit, and he left Basilio and his weapon in the hands of his own Custodes. During the battle aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Valdor became separated from the Emperor, and he and his Custodes found themselves in a dark abyss surrounded by demons. Part of a trap by Horus to drive the Captain General to torment, it made him feel something close to fear for the first time as he realized he could not fulfill his duty. Nonetheless, this did not stop Valdor's killing duty in the slightest as he slaughtered his way through hordes of demons. To confirm that he had indeed been teleported to the Vengeful Spirit, Valdor plunged the Apollonian spear into its floor to reveal its identity. After the Siege of Terra, Valdor met with the newly arrived Leman Russ. While Russ was distraught and pessimistic about what had befallen the Imperium and Emperor, Valdor expressed confidence that the Master of Mankind had foreseen all that had transpired and planned accordingly. Secretly, however, Valdor is unsure if this is true. Fate. Sometime after the Heresy, around the same time as the disappearance of Leman Russ, Valdor also disappeared without a trace. During the dead of night, Valdor simply slipped out of the Imperial Palace, turning back once to look upon the palace and whisper the first part of the Imperial quote, "Only in death," before vanishing. His fate is unknown even by the Custodes themselves. He is one of 3 captain generals to have gone missing without even the Adeptus Custodes being aware of the details. A book recovered and translated by Gideon Ravener and Elizabeth Bequin identified the enigmatic king in yellow as apparently being Constantin Valdor. Thank you for listening to this entry from the Warhammer 40,000 Lexicanum.